And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshowOregon.com. I'm Pete Belcastro. This is Alice Lema. We're both real estate brokers with John L. Scott in Southern Oregon. We get together with you once a week here on the radio and on YouTube to talk about our favorite subject, which is
real estate in Southern Oregon.
Boy, Jackson, Josephine counties around, lots going on. And we're thrilled today to have another John L. Scott agent with us. This is Dan Maymar. And Dan has been an agent. Well, you've been around a long time, man, haven't you?
I've been an agent since 2003.
Since 2003. Man, you're still doing it. You survived. I know you survived the great crash and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you're different because you bring so many skills to the table because you're a forester. How did that happen with you? How did that come about?
Well, I was a timber buyer for Roseburg Forest Products for about 10 years.
Okay.
And I was responsible for Jackson, Josephine, and all of the east side of Oregon, procuring
Wow.
logs for Roseburg Forest Products.
Well, that's a big company.
It was.
Yeah, it
And,
still is.
It still is.
It still is.
Even bigger, probably.
Yeah.
The amazing thing was that I did learn some skills in real estate. Not only was my dad a realtor, but I was responsible for buying timberland.
Okay.
And I did one project where we bought 500,000 acres of timberland.
Wow.
And I spent a month in a helicopter. It was really fun. But it was very interesting. And but there were so many projects that came up. I'd have somebody call up who wanted to buy a piece of property, and they'd say, "How much can I buy this property?" I have $500.
Yeah.
And I go, "Got $500? You can buy a piece of property. I'll fund the money." So I was kind of acting like the bank.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, what I would do is I would help them buy the property, and we would get, and the timber was the collateral on the note.
The timber was used as the collateral.
Right.
Well, we get lots and lots of questions. I mean, from buyers who ask, especially those in rural properties, they see 10 acres, 15 acres, whatever amount of acreage this is, and there's timber on it, right? There's a lot of timber out there.
Yeah, and they want to know how that works into the value of the property.
One thing that I would caution people to think of is like, there's a property value that is just the bare land, with no trees on it, no seedlings,
Right.
nothing, and then you kind of build value up from there. You can't have that bare land value plus the timber value. You can't just add two and two together
Doesn't
necessarily.
work. No.
Why
It doesn't
not?
work.
Because there's a lot of different variables. For instance,
Oh, gotcha.
It's about things
logging
like
costs, move-in.
how many trees there are per acre, the type of tree that's there, all sorts of things go into that calculation there.
Different trees have different values.
Right.
Pines are worth less than Douglas fir, for
Okay,
instance.
all right.
White
Oh.
fir is worth less than Douglas fir.
Really? Okay.
Huh.
I did some of that.
Yeah, but it's interesting that cedar is actually worth more on a per thousand basis than even Doug fir sometimes.
Okay.
In some markets.
Huh.
But that's because of the way cedar trees are shaped more like a cone more than a stovepipe.
And juniper trees are the worst of all, right?
They are the worst of all. When I see juniper, I think about fence posts. They're great fence posts.
That's about all that they're good for.
That's what they're
Yeah.
good for.
Of course,
And
yeah.
they're good. It's good wood.
You can burn that kind of wood, juniper wood and stuff like that?
It has quite a bit of
Crackle.
oil in it,
Yeah.
I think.
Crackle, what
Yeah,
they
I
call that
would.
thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't burn that kind of wood.
Because
So-
that would mess up your chimney, probably.
It would,
Yeah.
In our area here, what are the predominant species that we have in our lands that are Jackson, Josephine County, the rural property lands? What is specific do you know that are on them generally?
Most of the land in Jackson and Josephine County is Douglas fir, ponderosa pine. Up at the higher elevations, you'll have white fir or hemlock. That's pretty much the main species, and we have some minor species like Engelmann spruce, but they're
Okay.
very scattered and relatively rare. but they do exist. Mountain hemlock is another one.
See, those different. Could you identify any of those? If you see if they lined up here, could you identify
Me?
all those? Yeah.
I know what a sugar pine is
You
Yeah.
do? Okay.
because of what the zipline guy taught us.
So
yeah.
That's
yeah,
it.
you know, sugar pine, or you know,
Sugar pine?
they're kind of in the mid slope. They won't grow quite as low as ponderosa pine, but they will grow up a little bit higher. It's a 5-needle pine. It's a soft pine. It's more of it's not a white pine, but it's lighter than ponderosa pine in the wood.
Do you see people who buy things? And Alice, you sold properties this way. Do you see people with, again, treed properties? I tell people when I look at them, gee, I wonder if that should be thinned. You know, fire protection, things like that. Is thinning? If you have a 10-acre, 20-acre place that's treed, what do you do with that kind of thing?
I like to kind of look at the trees individually. In what I have done, I've actually gone out and I've splashed paint on the trees that I want to take out.
Take out. Sure.
So it's sometimes I take the bigger trees, sometimes I take the little trees, just to kind of space everything out, and but just trying to give just trying to thin it to what the forest.
So there's a
needs.
real art to that then.
There's a little bit of art, and but it's but generally if you do half of the big ones, half of the dominant and co-dominant. And let me describe dominant trees.
Thank you.
Okay, it's trees that are fully exposed to the sun. A co-dominant tree are like two trees growing together that basically have full crowns on one side.
Okay.
You have intermediate trees, which are kind of midway in the canopy, and then you have suppressed trees, which are underneath all the other trees surrounding it.
So we're going to buy a property. Say you buy a 30-acre property or a 10-acre, 5-acre property. It's treed. You've got different sites. If you can't walk around it, my thing is if you can't walk around your property easily, because it's growth so much, you got a problem. Is that a fair statement?
Not necessarily.
No?
I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
But
no.
don't the wildfire people,
yeah.
don't they want a certain clearing or height or
There is
for your fire protection?
what I've seen happen in the counties. Loma has done a lot of restoration work,
Yes.
fire prevention. They've taken out mostly the suppressed trees. I would say, all the trees that are right in the understory.
Okay.
And, so they've opened up the forest to some extent there, and they've eliminated all the ladder fuels that, from the ground. That
Because if I'm on my private property, I want to do that. I would think.
Yeah.
I would think I would want to do that.
Right. But that's not necessarily, the best in every tree
Okay.
situation.
Oh, I see. Okay, what you're saying.
Sometimes you want to, okay, I've got two really dumb trees, right here, that have, they're rotten or they're broken in some way, shape, or form. And then you have a young one that's kind of a young tree. It's,
Okay.
looking pretty good. You might want to encourage that one to grow.
Okay. What is what's the value of a big Douglas fir?
Well, define big.
Define big.
This
Okay.
big. I don't know.
So-
What's something like that worth? I have no idea.
Well, let's kind of think about, okay, the market last year was spectacular. We were getting $950 a thousand per board foot.
Okay.
It's per 1,000 board feet.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into that definition
It's
because
okay.
it's way too
That's all right.
complicated.
Yeah.
But those trees were going for $950. Say like you had logging costs at $200 per 1,000, and
Okay.
maybe $3 or $4 for timber tax.
Okay.
So
Timber
you can
tax.
expect maybe $700 per 1,000. Now a 1,000 board foot tree is a 96-foot tree, to a 6-inch
96
top.
foot tree. Okay.
To a 6-inch top.
And a rounded
And at the base, it would be about 28 inches.
20
inches.
20 inches.
28 inches diameter at breast height.
Okay.
Now, diameter breast height is defined as at a diameter at 4.5 feet.
Okay. All right. So they're worth some money.
There was some money.
There was some money. Okay.
Yeah,
All
but you
right.
start adding it up. It's you can have 400 trees per acre, and
Right.
I've walked into stands that were 70 years old that were just, it was really good site, and the trees were just crammed in there. They're limbed up. we used to call them bastard growth because they're not old growth,
They're
but
not
they're
old,
not
right.
young growth either. But just beautiful stands. And those can be running 60, 70,000 feet to the acre.
Okay. Now I've seen people. If you drive up some of the, the creek roads, like Sardine Creek or Thompson Creek or any of those roads around, and I've been in Jackson, Josephine, and even up in Douglas County, and I see coming across some place they're still clear-cutted on private land.
Right.
Is that still? You can do that, correct?
You can do that.
You can take every tree off your private land if you want to.
Yes, you can, up to a certain limit. And there are different limits, but yes, you can. And you can, but when you start clear cutting, you have a reforestation responsibility.
Even on on your private land,
Absolutely,
you do.
absolutely.
So all these areas that we see around us that have been clear cut,
Yeah.
is there a year they have to start planting or
Within-
something? 'Cause I've seen some terrible looking. I mean, let's face it, there's some terrible looking areas that are still out there that have been clear cut.
Right. Well, within 7 years, those stands need to have free to grow enough stocking, basically, and that's free to grow. And free to grow is defined as above the grass, above the brush,
Okay. Okay.
ready
Yeah.
to take off for the sky.
But wouldn't it be a better business decision and better for the forest and earth that's just in general to do it in maybe staggered over time so that you can have a continual harvesting and not have everything be bare all at the same time? Seems like that would just be better business practice.
I think in Jackson County, unless you have a north-facing slope on very, very good site, and we have very little site 3 ground, I think you're better off doing, like a partial harvest of some sort. I try to manage it in such a way that we'll have enough shade that the grass doesn't get a chance to take off. I try to make sure that and if it's a great seed year, I try to take advantage of it because try to get the logging done in September, October.
And as you plant, can't you? I know that one of the controversies on federal land, you can't apply pesticides
Right.
to anything, but on private land you can.
Yes.
And they grow faster, better if you apply, right?
Well,
is that generally true?
I don't personally. I don't like to use herbicides
Okay.
because I think that there's some problems with that.
Yeah.
I have planted trees or had trees planted, and basically I used that covering that will not allow weeds to grow,
Like
but
a
allow
mat?
water.
Like a weed
It's
mat?
like a weed mat. And
It's like what they use for hemp. To cover up the ground, that kind of thing.
I mean, but they do decompose over time.
Okay,
But
yeah.
they actually really give those seedlings a great shot at But you'll see the grass trying to grow right next to the trees, and you just yank it out.
Well, just a little bit of care, and it's amazing what you can do with your land and how you can prepare it and keep it and have it productive,
Right.
which is what so many buyers want when they move here. They want to have that experience of with the land. We're talking with Dan Maymar today on the Real Estate Show. Dan's a broker with John L. Scott with Alice and I here in Southern Oregon. He's also a forester, and we're getting his perspective about small woodlands and forestry properties that abound in Southern Oregon. We got a break. We're coming right back after this. Real Estate Show continues here on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshowOregon.com. Pete Belcastro and Alice Lema here today with you. We're talking with Dan Maymar. We're all three real estate brokers with John L. Scott here in a John L. Scott Market Watch show. Dan's a forester. I remember we were driving around Ashland. This was years ago. And with Jeff Rogers and our friend
Yeah.
Tom Cohan, and we were going on the tour. And somehow I didn't even know you had this. You were a forester, and I think Jeff Rogers brought that up, and we had a great conversation about this. And I remember that. And always, whenever we have questions, you go to Dan because he knows he can answer them, kind of thing like that.
And it's really funny. Everybody asks me, "What kind of a tree is that?" And I go, "Oh, okay."
Good use of your
And
forestry degree.
yeah, or what kind of wood is that on the floor? What kind of hardwood is this?
Yeah. Well, what is the big thing that when someone buys property with trees, what's the first thing they should kind of do? What would you recommend to them?
Well, if it's been recently logged, what I would want to do is I just want to make sure that you've met all the forest practice regulations. Forest land can be logged in such a way that, to a point where it might need reforestation. And if you were to purchase one of those properties, you have that reforestation obligation. It passes with the land, so to speak.
It passes with the land. Okay,
Yes.
that's like
what kind of disclosures are there on the seller's side?
There is a vacant land disclosure, and it's right in there.
It's right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of puts you on notice, but sometimes people ignore it.
Yeah.
So
I've never used that. I've never used that form. Have you?
Yes, because yeah. But the new one is a lot more detailed.
Okay.
It is.
All right. All right.
Well, but I think the main thing is to sometimes a forest property can be just so dense and so dark, really.
I see more of that, what you're described, than the other.
Right.
I would say that in my experience.
And when people are selling properties, and I'll walk on these properties and I'll go, there's some things you can do here that would really make the property really pretty. It'll allow more light to the home site.
Okay.
I think that you should also be really careful when you're looking at woodland resource property in Jackson County or forest property in Josephine County. If you're thinking about building a home on it,
Okay.
make sure you get some type of verification one way or the other with some experts to know that you can actually get a home site approval on that.
And that's the WR zoning in Jackson County. WR
Woodland Resource.
Woodland Resource.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have a similar designation in Josephine County. But you just need to make sure of that, because there are very specific templates, very specific conditions that you would need to adhere to in order to get that. If it's 160 acres or more, if it's owned woodland resource, no problem. You can site a home site. Whether or not you'd want to live there is another story.
Yeah. Are there tax advantages to owning small woodland with this resource? Is there advantages to that?
There are. For one thing, you have all this woodland resource. Woodland resource properties are taxed at a lower rate, much like farmland.
Much like EFU land,
Right.
is what we're seeing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the other advantage is there are some definite tax advantages. That you can take advantage of. If you do log a piece of property, logging is treated much like mining is. It's a depletion of a resource.
Okay.
The nice thing about logging or in forestry,
you can grow it back.
It
right?
grows back.
It grows back.
It's not like it's a finite resource,
Right.
but it's treated in that same way,
Okay.
tax-wise.
Didn't know
So you basically, when you're doing your taxes, it comes off as a depletion deduction. So any
Interesting.
income that you get from that, gets depleted, so to speak.
Yeah. If you were selling, say you owned a timberland property, how do you market that today? How would you market that, you think?
Kind of depends. I think that you can market it as having X number of board feet.
Okay, so you can actually measure that.
You can actually measure that.
That's what you would do. You would go out and you could actually measure it.
I'd actually measure the trees, and I actually come up with a board foot value.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's
and
huge.
not only that, you have to, what are the logging costs going to be, and all
Right.
that kind
And
of
is
stuff.
that called a timber cruise?
That is called a timber cruise.
A timber cruise.
Yeah,
That's
cruising in the
defini-
timber.
That's the definition. But then you have something you can actually write in the listing that's been validated by an expert.
Right. Yeah. And recent timber cruise, shows X number of board feet.
Well, how long are those good for, by the way?
Well, timberland grows 3%
It grows
a year.
every year.
It grows every year. It's like real growth. It's not like this stuff that we throw our money in the bank and.
No, timber grows 3% a year, the same as our property taxes do every year. That's what.
So you can just keep up with it.
3%.
Yeah.
There we go. I love 3%.
So does that mean then a timber cruise that's been done for you on your property would be good for basically ever? Because you could just mathematically.
You can
Add on
mathematically up to maybe a decade out.
Wow, that's pretty. So they're good for like 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say good for 10 years, but I would say that whether. I think after 10 years, you would really want to have another
Another
timber
one.
cruise.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. But that's quite a long time.
Yeah, it is. But it is a great marketing tool. There are people that are actually looking at timberland looking for timberland and 2 log, and that if you have timber property, that is one thing that I would do. I would also any other advantages, like you can get a home site on it, or if you can get a home site prior to putting it on the market, that would really help.
Yeah.
Get the septic approvals, get the spring or the well figured out, and get it and power to the property. That would really help.
Well, and that adds
a
a lot of value.
It
Yeah,
does.
it makes it more palatable for way more many buyers and builders. You might actually get a spec builder at that point.
Yeah,
Well,
you
it
really
certainly,
would.
it certainly doesn't work when you market that and just say we've got valuable timber, because you really don't know if it's got valuable timber unless someone's going to go out there and measure it and tell me what it is.
How much does
how
it-
much it is. I mean,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Well, we get so excited.
Yeah.
How much does a timber cruise cost?
I would say that a timber cruiser on relatively easy ground.
So is that
can-
flat? You mean
No,
flat?
no, 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 not flat.
Flat ground?
We have very little
Say,
flat ground.
Where is that?
I would, if it isn't too brushy, you can do 80 acres in a day. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's a good long day. That's 8
great.
hours of, really working hard. And cruisers are generally $150 an hour, just to give you an idea. And then you have the computations.
And do most of the people who do small woodlands, and when you're doing this, they're using a certain method to recover the timber? They're not just going in and blowing things up, but how are they harvesting, I guess, the timber today? Is it more environmentally better, or we hear all these sorts of different
What kind of
stories about it?
equipment and
On the smaller
power.
timber, like generally under 24 inches, mechanical feller bunchers are so amazing. It's great because they can actually put the trees in the skid road all bunched up. A skidder can just go in there with a grapple and grab the trees and go to the
pull 'em out.
landing.
and that actually sounds safe.
Oh, much safer.
Yeah.
I was marking trees on my property, and the feller buncher was just right there. The guy knew I was there, but the thing made so much noise. I managed to step into a yellow jacket's nest, and
Oh,
I
no.
had, I think I had like 26 bites. I ran to my truck,
Oh my goodness.
jumped in the truck, and one of the bees got in there
Oh,
with me, and
no.
I jumped out, and the bee went out, and I jumped back in, and I had a swarm of yellow jackets outside the truck,
Wow, yeah.
and
Oh.
while I nursed my wounds. But it's amazing how fast you can run in logging boots.
I'll bet you can. Well, one of the groups that can help you here, the Jackson Soil Water Conservation District has a land stewardship class also that they do, I think, twice a year, where it really deals with small woodland lot owners.
Right.
That gives you a plan about how to manage your property.
Right.
And we've done shows with them over the years. They were a sponsor of ours, and I always learned that so many new people come in here and buy these properties and really have no idea how to manage them.
Right.
And this gives you a chance to do that. It's the land stewardship class. JSWCD.org is the website for them. You pay 5 cents per thousand of your property tax to the Jackson Soil Water Conservation District now. So take advantage of that, especially more so for the woodland people than for the ag people. To me, this is more important.
Right. And also, I think there's some, the Oregon Department of Forestry has stewardship foresters that can come out and counsel you with, what
That's a
what
great
to do.
idea.
Yeah.
And, there's actually money available to do thinnings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That is available. You need a management plan. You would need to have a forester actually prepare a management plan, and then that management plan might include a timber cruise.
Well, that's what those classes do. They actually prepare those things with you. So that's kind of cool things to have.
Right.
Especially if you own one, what a great deal. Or if you just bought one, if you want to sell one, or if you want to buy one in the future, right? This
And we
is
get
really
a lot of
important to
calls
know.
for it. People want trees, and then they want to know how to manage them. But it's surprising how many people who don't have a background in forestry or even know what tree they're looking at.
Act like they're an expert. They probably shouldn't be.
But they want
right?
that kind of environment, and it's very cool. And that's why they come to Southern Oregon.
Yep. Hey, we got a break coming up here. We're with Dan Maymar today here on the Real Estate Show talking about forestry issues, small woodlands and all that. Trees cover so much of our counties, and we love our trees. I mean, we love our trees.
It's
We
what
want to
makes
take
us
care of them.
special.
We're coming right back after this. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show on KCMX News Media 880 and on YouTube at realestateshoworegon.com. Pete Belcastro and Alice Lema today with you, along with Dan Maymar in the house. We're talking about, talking real estate and specifically about small woodlands and forestry owners and things like that we've learned so much from you. So we really do appreciate that. You know, it's an art form. And people really need to be aware of that, take care of their properties. We always talk about that. And woodlands are just all around us.
You know, I have a question for you because the zoning woodland resource, WR, wasn't that included in the cannabis laws? It seems like a lot of the growers seem to want the woodland resource, and
Can't do it, though.
doesn't seem like it would be the best fit for that kind of crop.
It just depends. I have some clients who purchased a woodland resource property that had irrigation rights from a spring.
Okay.
And the spring was on another piece of property, but it had historic irrigation rights.
Oh, that's interesting.
So woodland resource is one of those zones that can actually have it. OSR, or open space reserve, as well as exclusive farm use, EFU lands with irrigation of some
You
form.
have some form of irrigation.
So
Okay.
by irrigation, we're talking about TID. We're talking
surface.
about
Yeah.
we're talking about rights, water rights that were given by the state to a particular piece of property. There are also irrigation wells, so they're even harder to get.
You
But
can't get
there
them,
is, but they are,
They're
you
out
can
there.
actually get irrigation wells, and so that would be another way
Occasionally.
that you
but
can.
I'm
Occasionally,
going to say
yeah,
that doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't
so
happen
just
very
remember.
often. Don't get excited.
But I've run across that too.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, though, is so much of our woodland resource land is sloped, and I just don't know how that works for crops.
Well, woodland resource can be sloped, and you can have a flat and bench. You can have like these little,
Terraces you're talking
terraces,
about?
benches.
Why would you ask that? Why would you ask that one?
Well, because the commercial farmers, whether you're doing cotton or you're doing cannabis, it just seems like a flat, usable EFU land would be better. And I'm just always surprised when the general public calls to start looking into woodland resource because the EFU or the farmland has just been priced out of their budget.
Oh.
Right.
But I would bet there would be just so little land today that is in that kind of category.
Yeah, and that's kind
right?
of why I
I
was
mean, that's
asking.
what you're saying.
Like,
There's
why-
just
The
not
amount
much.
of woodland resource or OSR land that has irrigation
so
rights
small.
is so small, but that
Right.
is one thing that you can see.
That
But
is an option.
I've seen EFU land that is steep and sloped, and it should have been zoned woodland resource, but it wasn't because a part of the property was a beautiful flat irrigated field.
Yeah.
So
There you
there's
go.
all kinds of variations.
Well, that's what we're talking about in terms of hemp growing, is that it's all on sloped land and it's going to wash away unless it's taken care of and things like that. We're going to see how this happens as this plays out here in the fall now when all the harvests start coming and the rains start coming.
Yeah.
It's going to play a different thing.
It's going to be really interesting when it starts smelling.
It's already done that. Walk out here to the station here, and you can even see that. Let's change the subject for just a second, if we can. Let's talk about the market. We have the latest rolling 3-month latest quarterly averages come through in Jackson, Josephine counties. Our value, the value increase was 4.9% in Jackson County, and
Which is nice, but that's slower than it's been for several years.
8.6 in Josephine County. Went up higher than that. Rural properties that we've been talking about here, they still are struggling.
It's
Aren't
pretty
they?
flat.
Why do you think that is? What's your opinion? We give our opinion every week here. What do you think?
I think that basically it's just market. It's just that people want to live in town. We're social beings probably, and I think they want to live near other people. There are some people that don't, and that's why we have rural property.
Well, that's an interesting perspective because demographically we're an older society here in Southern Oregon. So I wonder if we're starting to see a shift back into town, not only for socialization, but just because it's less work.
Probably, but
Maybe.
not necessarily. Because rural land can be a lot of work, or it could be you just
that's
watch
true.
it grow.
You could just keep it natural.
Well, the biggest downside in the rural properties is if you're over 10 acres, their value dropped in Jackson County in the last 3 months by 10% from a year ago.
Yeah.
So that's the cannabis, the hemp playing into this, the smoke. I don't know what it is, but that has not changed now for quite some time.
Well, those are also homes on 10 acres and up that they actually have homes on them.
Yes.
If it's not, that's not bare
We're
land.
not talking bare. No, we're not talking bare land. No, we're
Right.
talking that kind of thing. Yeah.
Residences.
Yeah.
But inventory was up from a year ago by 4% here. It was down 11% in Josephine County.
But you know, it's
That's
interesting.
so
'cause
weird, you
one
know?
of the other kind of, if you drill down, numbers that we have over 100% increase in availability in Talent, in Shady Cove,
What do you mean by availability? What
and
does
in
that mean?
Gold Hill.
What are you
It
saying?
means that there's 100% more houses this time this year than there was last year
On the market.
on the market. So part of what we're seeing in prices flattening out is just the sheer number of homes available for people to purchase. It's the supply and demand again.
Well, that's happening here. There's no question here in Jackson County. We're seeing that. Maybe the opposite in Josephine County, which they have less inventory than a year ago.
Right.
And yet their prices, look at that, Alice, were up double what they were in Jackson
Well,
County
and
because of that, because of the inventory,
Well, and
supply
don't
and
you
demand.
think? Yeah, don't you guys both have people that don't live in Jackson County? They start in Jackson County looking for the home search, and now they're choosing Josephine over Jackson.
I have
That
not
hit-
had that.
Oh,
happen,
it's
no.
happening
Well,
a lot.
I have them
Yeah.
going to Jackson,
Yeah.
then they go to Josephine, and those, they can't find anything there, and it's pretty hard in Josephine County to find stuff. They're now going to Klamath and Douglas counties because it's even more affordable there.
Oh,
so
that's
more
interesting.
our market is doing that
Yeah.
because we're again pricing ourselves here in Jackson County. We only have so much that we're doing, and the demand is pretty high here.
I track the stats for Ashland City.
Okay.
And in the midst of the recession, we were like 17 active listings for every pending sale. And I just checked
What
it
is
out.
it today?
It's 3.1. So
Wow.
so anyway, if you're looking at 5 being a really well balanced market,
5
and
houses per.
5 active listings for every pending sale being a really healthy.
That's how you look at that. Okay.
Healthy
That's how I look
normal.
at it. And
Okay.
When I think that is this a seller's market? It doesn't feel like a seller's market.
No.
No, it's not.
It
No, it's
doesn't.
totally changed out of that.
I haven't really been able to explain that, but because it's a little bit different than when I first started my career.
Well, and Ashland is different into itself.
It is. It's a
Yeah.
bubble.
Yeah.
But remember, in our world, though.
Go ahead, Alice.
Yeah.
You're from Medford.
No. Actually, I relocated to Medford. I'm from Ashland.
In the last
Yeah.
in the last section, there was I think in the $1 million houses, the Jackson County Housing Report, $1 million properties in Jackson County. There's now a 32-month supply.
And it's been that way for a while. That's
So
3
the
years.
$1 million, the luxury market is definitely a buyer's market.
It is.
When you go down that 500,000 and below, it really does change.
Yeah, it
And
just
are
flips.
you still getting multiple offers on small on $250,000, $300,000 properties?
It's
that's still
not
out there.
as often.
Not as much.
It's
Yeah,
not
but I
as
still get them
much,
too.
But it's
yeah.
coming down because
Yeah.
we're in the fall market now, which is we're seeing that peak and we're coming down slowly along
Mm-hmm.
the way. But it also makes great opportunities for out there people still looking.
Right, especially
That's
if you
the thing
want a
we
more
say.
expensive home, and the interest
Yeah.
rates are ridiculously low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And there are
it's-
many homes that have been on the market for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And maybe those
It's
sellers
a little
might
too high
be
priced.
obviously the reason that it's been on the market for 2 years is that the price is too high relative to the value of the property.
And if you don't sell in that first 30 days, the chances go down
dramatically
from there.
Yeah.
And we know that watching all the stats. Well, look, we're out of time today. We've come through. Gosh, we covered a lot of territory. Dan, thanks for coming by and
You bet.
sharing
Well, that was wonderful.
great information about the trees and woodlands and the great properties that we have
And just
here.
taking care, how to take care of it.
Yeah, we love them.
Yeah.
I want to thank Brett Nance, who was our engineer
Thank
for
you,
our
Brett.
program here on YouTube
Brett.
today as well. So thank you, Alice. We'll see you next week as well. Have a great week, everybody. That'll do it for the Real Estate Show. Check out our past shows at realestateshowOregon.com. We are back next week as well. You have a great week, and God bless you all.
Right. Bye.